Hey everyone and welcome back to Valheim. Beeblebum here, and today I want to show you my improved breeder design. After receiving feedback from some viewers, I've addressed the previous issues with the breeder, such as feeding problems and animals getting stuck. The design I've come up with not only ensures a consistent production of offspring, but also protects against any flying raids like bats or those pesky deadsquitos. Now you might be wondering, why would you want to build a breeder like this? Well, here's the deal. If you have a certain number of animals in a pen, let's say 10 boars in an 8 by 8 meter pen, they won't procreate until they have fewer animals or more space. So to avoid this limit, we need to create a distance between the breeding animals and their offspring. To achieve this, we need a minimum of 10 meters between them, and the best way to do that is by building it vertically. Now, to keep the breeder from becoming too much of an eyesore, I prefer to build it over a hole. This approach has two advantages. It reduces the overall height of your farm, and it provides a better protection for your animals. I want to dig a hole as deep as possible, and of course with a level floor. 8 meters is the maximum depth, at least in the vanilla version of the game. So when choosing a spot to build your farm, look for a nice level area for optimal results. The size of the finished hole should be 8 by 8 meters. Yet, due to the terrain and how it slopes, the top area will end up being 11 by 11 meters. However, the uneven measurement is gonna mess up with our construction, so I will build a stone framework around the hole that measures 12 by 12 meters on the inside. Now, the materials needed for this breeder design may vary depending on your game progress. While you can build it entirely out of wood, I highly recommend using a stone foundation for better strength and integration with the design. If you're building this in wood, your walls will not be as thick as the stone, so I recommend building it 14 by 14 meter. Also, be aware that structural integrity is much less with wood, so you might have to build some extra supports. Since we want to maintain at least 10 meters of distance between the offspring and the breeder, we also need to measure the height from the bottom floor to the breeder platform. Personally, I like to play it safe and go for a 12 meters distance. Regardless of the distance you choose, make sure to build a wall that is 2 meters lower than where the breeder platform will be. And of course, we also need to build access to the lower part of the breeder. To create the roof, start by building a 45-degree corner roof on each corner of the stone frame. While I'm using a shingle roof in my build, you can easily adapt it with a thatch design. Except for the access point for the breeder, you can close off the sides of the roof as well. Once the roof is in place, connect core wood beams between them, and make sure the core beams are snapped on top of the roofs. With that done, you can now frame it off by snapping floors on the inside until you have a hole in the center consisting of 3 by 3 floors. That is where the breeder will go. To begin constructing the breeder framework, start with a short beam on the middle floor. This is only temporary, as it serves as a snap point. On the 2 remaining floors, you can now snap a 2 meter beam to frame it off. Then rotate a 2 meter beam 90 degrees and snap it onto the short beam. And then build 2 more beams until you reach the other side. Once that is done, close off the frame on that side as well and replace the short beam with a 2 meter beam to complete the foundation. Take the short beam again and position it at the junction between beams. Rotate it 45 degrees and snap it in place. Repeat this process at the other junction as well. Now keep snapping short beams at these junction until you have created 2 crosses. On each of the ends, snap a 2 meter beam at a 45-degree angle inward to straighten them up. And look at that, you have created 4 slots, perfect for housing your boars. But wait, we need a platform for our boars to stand on, otherwise they just fall through. So take the short beam again and position it against the side beam here. Rotate it 45 degrees and snap it. Do the same with another short beam, rotate it again and make it straight. Repeat this process on the other side. Now remove the 45-degree beams, and the short beam will be serving as a guide and snap point for the floors we will be placing. You can use advanced snapping or just aim against the beam until it snaps into position. The floor should partly merge with the outer floor and be centered with the slot. Then snap another floor against the first one and then repeat that process on the opposite side as well. And yes, I noticed later that I snapped the floors in the wrong spot. I will fix that later. Once that is done, it's time to remove the short beams. And just like that, you can see it already taking shape. Next, let's build half walls on the cross sections. For the best results, I like to point the small beams on these walls towards the center line of the breeder. After that, we snap short walls on the side of each beams, once again making sure the little beams are pointing away from the pens. Now, let's focus on building the feeding system. Start by snapping a 2-meter beam from the outer wall on each side. Let them overlap in the middle, that's not a problem. On top of these beams, snap a low door, but make sure it shifts halfway back. Attach a short wall with the smooth surface towards you and snap it on the beam, making sure it is merged in the door. As you can see, it's like perfectly merged flat with the door. Once the walls are in place, remove the beams and doors. With the wall slightly shifted backwards, we ensure that food will fall straight in front of the animals when throwing against it. We can now do the same with the other side of the breeder. Now it is time to create an easy access and more workspace. Start by adding a few more roofs on both sides where the pens are located. We want to leave a gap of 6 meters on both sides. This is where you will be standing when throwing food at the animals. Once it is done, raise the stone wall by 2 layers. I like to build them in bond style just to make it look nicer. Add a layer of core wood on top of that, aligning it with the breeder floor. Again, I like to use 3 pieces of core wood just to make the joints look better. Finally, close off the floor. For easy feeding, you can create a reminder of where to stand. We can do that by using a low door and just create the shifted snap points. We want to make sure that the door is snapped completely on the floor like this, not halfway. Then place a short beam so it merges inside the door. After that, remove the door and snap a 2-meter beam against the short beam, and finally replace the short beam with a long one to mark your standing position. If you feel like this beam is not enough, you can also snap a core wood on top just to block you off. But that might also cause you some issues when you want to pass through. The breeder is nearly finished and soon we're ready to bring in some boars. But before we do, let's make sure we don't accidentally lose any through these holes. So let's close them up for now, just to be safe. Before we move on to the roof, I would like to point out the gaps on either side of the breeder and what their purpose is. You see, in my previous breeders, I sometimes had the issue with my animals rotating the wrong way. But by leaving open space on the sides, it takes away the possible pathway for the animals, making them look towards the only likable way of escape. Now it is time to cover the breeder with a roof to protect your animals from flying mobs. Start by building a complete wall around the outside of the floor, leaving space for 2 access points. On top of the wall, we now start with another roof. This time I will be using a 26-degree angle just purely for aesthetic choice. You can easily build this with 45 degrees as well, depends a bit on what you're going for. To make sure we have enough headroom when entering the breeder, I'm gonna build a gable towards the entrances. So we can snap an inverted roof corner here and then close off the roof like this. That should give enough space to place a large gate in the middle. To prevent any accidental escapes and simplify future board placement, we'll be replacing the current short walls here with full ones. Furthermore, it is important to note that we should not close the roof yet, as we intend to guide the boars into the slots from above. Next, we want to build a platform to guide the boars into their slots. As this is not a very important and permanent construction, I will leave the time-lapse to show you how I constructed it. The most important you should remember is to make sure the boars cannot escape or fall in the wrong spot. You don't need to worry about this looking beautiful, it's only temporary. A good tip is not to have any sharp inwards corners to avoid the boars getting stuck in them. Using a smooth curve will make it much easier to push the boars in later. To be able to bring the boars up there, we need to snap a 26-degree roof on the side and bring that down to the terrain. You might have to support it here and there to avoid collapsing. The 26 degrees is to ensure you can walk it up and push the boars. 45 degrees will not work. On the side of the ramp we'll need to build barriers, just not to have any boars drop off in the process. At the bottom we can build a small pen to bring the boars into later. While you can use a harpoon to pull the boar up the ramp, I prefer to avoid it as much as possible. I mean, 2-star boars can take a hit, but seriously, you want to take that risk? A quick tip here, don't do this when you only have 2-star boars enough to fill the slots. Just breed a few extra more to have a buffer when anything goes wrong. Now, pushing the boar will also put you in the right spot when you want to push them into the slot. And don't worry about the orientation when they drop inside, thanks to the gaps, they will turn automatically. Once the 2 first boars are in, we can now adjust the delivery system and continue with the 2 remaining ones. When checking later, you'll see that all the boars are now looking outwards to the feeding slots. So why not give them some lovely carrots and make them happy and productive? Simply stand against the beam like this, look at the piece of wall here and throw your food against it. It should hit the wall and then fall straight down in front of your boar. It shouldn't be long before they start eating. Now, before these boars really get happy, we should remove the floor panels we snapped behind them, so we make sure the little piglets drop down the holes. After that, we can close the roof, clean up the area and do some finishing touches. So make sure to have some access to the second level of the breeder, so you can always check up on them and make sure they have enough food. And if you want, you can also dig a bit of a trench towards the bottom of the breeder, so it's easy to collect any animals when needed for transport, especially when you use the breeder for wolves instead. Talking about wolves, it is indeed possible to use the same breeder for wolves. However, you will need to make some slight adjustments. First, you will not be able to work with 4 wolves. You only can use 3. Using 4 wolves will block them from breeding. We also need larger slots, as 2-star wolves take more space. You can easily do that by replacing the 2 walls in the center by 1 wall instead. And yes, you can also combine this breeder and have 2 wolves and 2 boars in this breeder. Tamed animals do not attack each other. And that should be it for this guide. Before I say goodbye and leave you to it, I would like to inform you that this breeder was tested with 2-star boars and wolves. While I'm not expecting much difference with regular animals, they are smaller and that might mean they have more space. However, this is something you can experiment with if that happens, and to be honest, I never make a breeder until I have myself some starred boars or wolves. Is this breeder 100% failsafe? Most likely not. The game sometimes bugs out or a random piglet gets stuck in the upper level. It is what it is. If that happens, you just deal with it. The main aim of this guide was to show you the breeder design. For the rest, you can use your own skills and imagination to make it look great. And finally, if the terrain editing confused you, then you should check out this guide here about how to create perfect terrain. In there I explain all the details you should know about how to know exactly where to cut and how to level out. And if you have any more questions, you can always drop them in the comments or on the Discord. And either myself or other members of the community will be able to help you out. If you enjoyed this guide and found it helpful, then a thumbs up would be highly appreciated. Have an awesome day and see you next time. Beeblebum out.